Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm Krista Harmon, one of the career readiness consultants with the Kent Intermediate School District. And I'm so delighted to have Abby Langenberg with us today. She is a director of construction. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you.
So Abby, as young people watch this, and we have some school counselors on the call with us today, help us understand what you were thinking way back when you were 16 or 17. Did you think you'd grow up to be a director of construction? What were your thoughts?
Sure. So not at all. When I was 16 or 17, I was studying Spanish a lot in high school. And I really thought, I want to do something that has some meaning in the world. And I figured since I was learning Spanish, it would probably be in Latin America. So I figured I would be overseas doing some type of work there, not really sure what. So when I went off to college, I was majored in global studies and Spanish. So I've come quite a long way from there. So definitely not what I was expecting at all.
And so as you were pursuing this degree in global studies, what was the turning point that you give us some of those turning points that kind of shifted you over to the construction industry? We'd love to hear that transition.
Sure. So behind the scenes, my husband and I were doing some rental properties, and so with that, it was a little bit of thinking, if we did the maintenance ourselves, we could save some money here. But I think really the big one for me was, and we were living in Chicago, and I wanted to contribute some income. I was staying home with my kids, but we had a basement in our apartment that was like a bedroom and a bath with a separate entrance. And I thought, this could be an Airbnb. So I kind of envisioned the space and pulled it all together to be a little Airbnb space. And that process of what could this look like, and then making it into that, I really enjoyed that. So then it was a little bit of kind of expanding that from there and following that path of, hey, what if I do this a little more, and then a little more, and it kind of just kept going from there.
And so had you been a young woman who built things when you were in high school or elementary? Had you ever played around with tools? Tell us about that connection. This was kind of a whole new area of interest.
This is a whole new world for me. So I get that question a lot, especially when I was on site in the field. People would always say, oh, is your dad a carpenter? Is your grandpa a builder? And no, my dad asks me how to use tools now. So I really wish that I had grown up in that way, because I feel like, man, I would be so much farther along in my knowledge than I am now. But no, so I wasn't really necessarily hands-on growing up. I definitely had a figure it out attitude and a willingness to look at something and say, how does this go together? But that really wasn't expanded on until I kind of started going down that path and working in construction.
I think this is so important for young people and educators who are listening to this, because I think sometimes, and me as a career developer as well, we like to look at clues of the person as a young person, like what kind of games they played, how what kind of their hobbies as clues. And while that's really important strategy, I love that, we shouldn't limit ourselves, that we should always continue to try new things. And I love that you had that figured out, that you had some mechanical ability. So that was some of those natural skills you had, right? And an attitude, which seems like really important point when you're in construction. So you were doing this rehab, really enjoying this stuff. And then how did this end up being like a paid gig for you?
Sure. So after that, of course, since I had pulled something together, I thought, well, now I'm going to be Joanna Gaines. I'm going to flip a house. And so I did one of those, more just on the investment side, didn't really do anything hands-on. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to try and do a flip. So, buy a house, fix it up and sell it, hands-on. I learned a lot through that. That was my kind of first foray into really using tools and trying stuff out and tiling tubs around and whatever. But I found that I hate working by myself. And so that was kind of where, well, what's the next step? How do I learn more? So after that, it was, well, I'll get my builder's license and I'll learn more from that. And so I did that, and I felt like I didn't really learn that much from that. So then I was like, okay, how do I learn more? And so that was when I did GRCC's job training program, which is their residential construction. You build a house from start to finish. And I learned a ton there. And after that, really, especially with how the job market is for construction, the opportunities were there for really kind of whatever direction I wanted to go.
So much about that I love, that you are the one very self-motivated, just kept pursuing. You're a lifelong learner, obviously. Someone just typed that literally. What a great trait that you have. And so you sought your builder's license and actually joined the residential construction program. Tell us more about that so young people can understand what an advantage that is to get some training.
Yeah, that honestly, that's probably one of the things that I recommend the most, because the return on investment there is incredible. It was 18 weeks. That's such a small amount of time. And there's money available, at least there used to be, through Michigan Works, to apply to the program. So, to come out 18 weeks later with so much more knowledge and to be able to go right into the job market, that return on investment is right there. And I think for me, it gave me such a jump start, because a lot of times when you go into the trades, you start out like level 0, and all you do is you move lumber around, or, people play pranks on you, and you just are grunt work is what they call it. And so you're not necessarily learning the right way to do something. You're just kind of watching people and maybe learning something here and maybe learning that over there. And so I think having gone through that program, learning, oh, this is how you do this, and this is how you do this part, and this is how you do this, like learning the right way to do something all the way through. Then when I went out into the field and started applying on that, my learning curve was like exponential, I think, by comparison to just going in with nothing. So I would say hugely, hugely beneficial to me.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And I think also what I want to point out to young people watching this, and even some of the school counselors, is that you didn't have this figured out when you were 18. So much pressure on young people to figure it out. And you did this after you'd had children, after you had done some other things. And, looking back, I know you said you wish you maybe would have grown up with some other folks in construction, but, this is how the journey went, right? And it doesn't have to be one way. That you can always change or grow and add to your toolkit. Haha, pardon the pun. With skills and knowledge. So just wonderful to hear that. Were you one of few women at the GRCC program, and how was that for you?
I was the only woman in my class, and it was okay. It was okay. The teacher was great. We did have, one moment where, early on in class for me, me and a guy are standing on opposite sides of the porch, and he's giving all the directions to the guy. And I said, hey, you can give some directions to me too. Like, I'm up here. But later on in the class, it was like, hey, it's not that you're a woman. It's just that like you were new. And so learning curve for me for being like able to just sit back and not have to assert myself all the time. But also, that was okay. But I think it is good to know, as a woman in the construction industry, you're gonna face some things that aren't always going to be easy, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to put out on the table, because it is reality. Do you have any coping strategies or encouragement around that? If there's a young woman who's deciding that might be a good fit for me, that you should just help her, don't take it all personally, or like what comes to mind?
Sure. Yes, don't take it all personally. Don't talk to your coworkers about it, because they just can't understand, unfortunately. Find a mentor, find an ally. If there are other women in the field that or in the field adjacent or anything like that you can call and that they can get it. It's so helpful. I was incredibly fortunate to have even like a couple of guys that I worked really closely with that they didn't get it at first, but just working next to me and seeing, we'd go to the lumber yard and they'd plop, a load of wood on the truck, and the guys at the lumber yard would kind of hover around me while I strap it down. And my coworker's like, this is so weird. Like, why are they doing that? And I'm like, this is what it is. And so, I think just finding your allies and being willing to build that team so that when you need to call and say, man, this is hard, that they can get it. And I think that's really helpful. So, and then when you're dealing with it head on and like, I'm dealing with some stuff right now, you just gotta like, whew, I don't care about that. Keep it moving and just do your thing.
Yeah, that resonates with some of the work I've done in the past with women in the trades, and having a good support system is so important. And, So you graduated from GRCC's residential construction program, and like you say, the market's fantastic. Did you just have to beat back the employers with a stick? Like, did you apply to lots of places, or did you already have a sense of where you wanted to work?
So we were working with another builder was kind of right down the street from us where we were working. And so I ended up going to work for him, probably just because like I already knew him, I knew how he worked. And so that just kind of fell into my lap. And that's why I started. And that ended up being pretty good for me because he did all encompassing residential and a little bit of commercial work. So I got exposure to a lot of different stuff and even was able to kind of start, running crews and doing some trades contractor relationship stuff. And so because it was a smaller company, my exposure to things was pretty great. So I think that ended up, working out pretty well for me.
Yeah, I love that you were able to build skills because it was a smaller company. So what was that next transition then for you? What led you to the next place?
So after that, it was more of, I wanted like residential hours, and smaller companies also mean like kind of huge fluctuation in what your hours are and that sort of thing. So I wanted just like a little bit of consistency. So I went and I got a job with Rockford Construction. So that's a commercial builder here in Grand Rapids, and started out in the field there as a carpenter as well.
That's what I was just going to clarify. What skilled trade you kind of then claim in the residential construction? Is it carpentry that you're
Yes.
So do you have to go through some licensing, or what credentials do you have to prove to the state to have that ability to be a carpenter?
I don't know that there's not necessarily like a credential for carpentry. I think you can get something through, like if you're union or something like that, like a journeyman. But for me, I had my builder's license, which kind of establishes some credibility, but really I think it's kind of, can you do the work? Can you show that you can do the work? So
yeah, that's a good point. And I guess just since we're talking about this, for young people that may not know what an apprenticeship is, that's certainly another route to become a carpenter. Is there anything you'd just like to say about that to help kind of bring awareness to it?
I think that starting out and learning is hugely beneficial. So I think that's definitely something to pursue. I don't know a ton about that since that's not the route that I went, but I would say anytime that you can, skills pay bills. So anytime that you can just increase what you know and what you know how to do, totally worthwhile. So
yeah, for young people who are watching this, Google apprenticeship. It's learning on the job. You're getting paid while you learn. So usually around a 4-year commitment, and the company is paying for your schooling that you need, usually once a week at a community college, and you're working every day, full benefits, vacation, the whole 9 yards, and you end up with a journeyman's license. So that's just a different route than what Abby did. So Abby, you're working for this big construction, commercial construction, and what was that work like? Did you have some good takeaways from that? I know eventually you left to another company, but what was a good takeaway from that experience?
I think, in commercial work, what you do in terms of like your scope of work is just limitless. So in that, like the types of work that I was exposed to and that ability to figure it out really grew. I did a lot of work in the Amway Hotel, and a hotel is not an easy place to do work in because you have to be quiet during certain hours, and you have to, take an elevator 18 stories down to be able to cut something. So that ability to like, let's get creative, and how do we do this? And just different environments and different levels of expectation for quality of work. So I think that just all of that exposure to different things, I think that was hugely, hugely beneficial. And then I also had the opportunity to start running jobs there. So taking on a little bit more of a leadership role and developing myself in that way too was fantastic.
Well, it sounds like some of your bosses have seen that ability or qualities about you, since it's kind of happened in a couple of your roles. Why don't you give us an example, because you've been in the trades long enough, what are some of those qualities that a young person should have? Obviously, that figure out attitude seems pretty important. Anything else that you're looking for when you're hiring people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, attitude for me is number one. When I'm looking to hire somebody, it's what is the attitude like? And with that is, are you willing to try to better yourself? Are you working on growing? Are you willing to try to kind of figure things out? So And then additionally, communication is huge in the trades, and that doesn't necessarily get talked about, but communicating and over communicating, because so much gets lost. And that's really where mistakes happen on a construction site, is not communicating. So that is a huge piece to work on. And even I would say over communicating, where you're like, I think I told them that, and I think that they got it, pretty much shouldn't fly. It should just be like, I'm just going to call back. I'm just going to send the email. I'm just going to double check with a text to make sure that they, confirm this or that detail, because that's really where things get lost in translation and get messed up.
Yeah, we've certainly heard that from quite a few role models in a variety of industries, that communication is so important. And as educators, right, that's what we need to be focusing on. So if educators are on the call today, how do we tangibly teach that? What are those really explicit ways that we're helping young people with communication? Give us an example, Abby, when you think about the industry of construction, what does it mean to communicate? Is it following up with just the email? Is it the way you talk, even like men versus women? Like, you might think you're communicating it one way, but people aren't receiving it. What kind of comes to mind?
Sure. There's a couple of tools that I try to use now. So I would say I kind of do like the 1-2 punch. So often I will start with a phone call, kind of like to prep the conversation, and say, hey, on this house here, we're coming up on carpet. What does your schedule look like? Blah, blah, blah. And then once we kind of, talk about some stuff on the phone, and they say, yeah, I think probably next Friday that will work. This is that. Can you send me this, or whatever they need? And then so once you hang up, then you follow up with an email, and you're like, hey, here's what we said. Will that work for you? I'm going to pencil this into my calendar. Let me know what else you need. And so just that follow-up, being willing to like make it a 2-step thing, even when you think it could be a 1. And then also, as you're communicating with your team and you're giving direction, I will say, here's what I'm looking for. And I kind of, sometimes I'll ramble on for a while, and then circling back at the end and say, so let me just recap that, this, that. Brene Brown does a really good job of saying, like, let me paint done. Here's what done looks like. Or also, when someone is communicating to me, I will ask the question, or kind of repeat back to them what I think they're saying. And I'll just say, what I'm hearing you say is, you want us to be there on this day, blah, blah, blah. Is that correct? And it gives them an opportunity to correct you or tell you, yes, that's what I'm saying, or no, it's not what I'm saying. And so just some of those skills of honestly just repetition is really kind of the thing, and just giving the opportunity for clarity so that nothing gets lost in translation.
Great examples. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about director of construction, what does that mean? What should young people understand? Was it like project management?
So it's a little bit of everything. What falls into my scope is, we have new builds, we have renovations, and then we have a warehouse that receives a lot of donations to be able to kind of go into habitat houses. So a lot of that is sort of looking at things high level in terms of the schedule and everything that needs to happen. And then also being able to kind of filter that down into the details to make it happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't ask earlier, we didn't state, because this is really a time for your story, but Abby currently works for Habitat for Humanity. And so go ahead and help us understand that transition then from Rockford to Habitat. Was that the next move for you? There was a move within Rockford. So I was in the field for a while, and then I kind of took on a role that was a little bit like in between the field and the office as the general foreman. So doing all the scheduling for the trades and kind of management of the field staff. So, and then from there, that's where I went to Habitat for Humanity. So I think for me, while Rockford is a fantastic company to work for, and there's just a ton of benefits in general, I love the people I work with. What was missing for me is that piece that I started with when I was 17, 18, was I want this to matter in some type of way. I don't want it to just be about dollars and cents in buildings. So that was really what drew me to Habitat, and it felt like a really good move for me. Yeah, that is so great. And young people that are watching, that really touches on our values, and our values is what gets us out of bed on Monday morning. It's not the paycheck, like Abby was just saying, she can build anywhere, but she wanted it to matter. And so you get to help people who don't have homes now have homes. So tell us about your current job then, and some of the initiatives that you get to work with outside of just your day job?
Sure. So basically, like I said, for the upcoming year, Habitat for Humanity we'll build 10 new houses, we'll do 10 renovations, and then those will go to families with a low to moderate income. So a lot of times people think, oh, you guys give houses away for free. That's not true. We actually, they do purchase their home and then they do some work on it as well. So just clearing up a misconception there. And then, so for me, that means, I have project managers, I have site supervisors that lead volunteers. I have a real estate specialist who helps us acquire property for those renovations. And then, like I said, my warehouse staff. So a lot of it is managing, people, schedules and all of that. But what I get super excited about is some opportunities that I have like this. I also get to teach a women's workshop upcoming, and also a day camp for 6th to 8th graders later on this summer. So those opportunities to be like out in the community and build some excitement around the trades, because it's a really cool industry to be in. That's the stuff that I get super excited about that isn't necessarily in my day job description.
Yeah, I think that's what's so beautiful of hearing your journey, Abby, how things were building and all the skills you were developing and the relationships you were making, and you kept refining it to what something is, like, say, meeting your values, and obviously lights you up. It's so cute to see you so excited about your work. That's what, to me, as a career developer, life should be. We should all look forward to our work. Being a role model, what is that like for you when you meet young women at Innovation Central or even some of these other day camps? What's that been like for you?
I love it. I think the biggest thing, and I probably project some of myself onto young women and younger people, is I know for me growing up, there was, from whatever your experience is growing up, you've got a certain ceiling in your head of, this is where I can go to. And it took me being involved with mentors and coaches to help me like remove that and say, whatever I want to do, that's available to me. And so I think, for that's one of the things I really love about working with younger people, is helping them to see, hey, like, let's work on that ceiling. Let's get that to go away, because whatever you want, it really is available to you. And what is that? And helping them to kind of figure that out.
That's inspirational, Abby. I love that. We obviously know what you love. Are there anything about your role or carpentry in general that you're like, yeah, I don't really like that?
Yeah, I really do not love writing processes or job descriptions or contracts, anything where it's just like a whole lot of paperwork that you got to check over a lot of times. That's not my jam. Definitely has to be done a lot of times, but I don't love it.
What percentage of your job do you think that might be, to help young people understand that we sometimes don't get to have jobs that we love all the way? So, but we probably should keep it in a percentage of like versus not like. So what would that be for you?
I'd say probably it varies between like 6 and 15% of the time.
Yeah, that's pretty low.
Not terrible.
Yeah, I would say that same with my job. The percentage of the things I don't like is at that lower 10 to 15%. Really important. Mm-hmm. I just want to give people on our Zoom a chance to ask any questions. So please put it in the chat if you like. What were your friends and family thinking about when you made this transition into construction?
I think they were a little skeptical, at first. Not necessarily like not supportive, but just like, oh, that's not, it's not a thing that women normally do, or, okay. But I've also been a little bit out of the box most of the time. So I don't think it was any surprise that I would do something a little, not traditional. So I think they were like overall supportive, and like as it's come along, they can understand it and see it more now. So
yeah, and for any young people who are watching this and maybe do get the pushback, what would you recommend that how they handle that?
It's tough, because when you're in that situation and it's your family, it's a lot harder to like let that go. But if you can find a trusted mentor that can remind you that it's okay to go against the grain, I think that's a huge thing. And if, sometimes you have to be your own mentor in that way to say, hey, this is what I feel, and that is true. And just remind yourself of that over and over. If that's like writing a little note to yourself on your whiteboard or your wall or whatever, just to remind yourself constantly, like, this is where I need to go, and I'm going to trust that.
That's great. Thank you. if we have young people who are watching this, they're like, you know what, I'm going to do a little research on this carpentry stuff. What would you recommend that they be doing in high school? Also, do you offer any types of job shadows, any experiences that they can get hands on if they happen not to be at a school that works with you through Habitat?
Yeah, we do have volunteer opportunities. They can contact me and get involved to volunteer, which can also, kind of lead to other opportunities. And I would say, there are a lot of educational opportunities, and even just if you can find a way to start to, use some tools and kind of figure out, what you like, what you don't like. There's so much even just within construction, and some stuff will kind of start to make sense to you of, oh, this is really fun and this part isn't. And just kind of start to play around a little bit and see what kind of lights you up.
Because that's the reality too. There's so many different trades within construction, right? So to explore a little bit is so important. I know that some young people are thinking, math, I'm not sure I'm good with math. What would your advice be around that? Yes, you have to have a handle on it, but is there room to, once it's applied, it maybe makes it easier? I don't know. What are your thoughts on math?
Sure. I think within the construction industry, there's a lot of different arenas. Some of them are going to be super math heavy. But some aren't. Where I'm at now, I don't do a whole ton of math. If you're an estimator, you probably are going to be. If you're maybe a cabinet maker, you might be doing a lot of math as well. But I think there's still avenues, even if math isn't your jam, for sure.
Yeah. So young people explore the trades that are out there. There's just so many. There's people who do the windows, and there's people who do the drywall, and there's people who do just flooring. So many exciting things. And again, big in demand, right, Abby? I mean,
Yeah,
old white men are retiring out, and they need young people to come in.
Absolutely. We are just, I would say construction in general is starving for people. What I hear is, I've been trying to hire somebody for forever. And I feel that I am currently trying to hire somebody, and I'm having the hardest time. So, there's so many jobs available right now.
Well, our 30 minutes went pretty fast, Abby. We're at that point where you get to share kind of a final word of wisdom for young people that are exploring, or even to their parents or school counselors that might be watching this. What would you like to say?
Sure. I actually had a conversation with a good friend who's in the building industry today, and we were talking about, what does an ideal day look like? And I would just encourage you to think about, sometimes we think, well, I couldn't do that. And just to take that away and say, what if I could, whatever that thing is, if it's building, or it's being a fishing guide, or it's being, a decorator, or whatever it is, take away the, well, I can't, and just think about, what if I could, and then just start moving in that direction. And then you'll figure it out along the way. If you don't have to get it right the first time, and it will start to present itself.
That's gold. I love it. That's gold. You've been such a great role model to us today, Abby. Lots of positive comments have been coming in the chat the whole time that you were talking. People are just thrilled with what you were sharing. So thank you for being with us today.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.